Have you ever parked your car, walked away from it, and struggled to find it later because you've forgotten where you parked? We expect you have. Almost everyone does it at some point. Usually, though, you'll find your car again after a brief search. Your vehicle generally doesn't end up stuck in the same place for the next 20 or 30 years. We can't say the same for the vehicles you're about to see in this video. They're pretty unique machines, and they've been abandoned in unique circumstances too. A lot of people find hearses a little weird to look at even at the best of times. That's understandable. They are, after all, vehicles that were designed to transport the dead to their final resting place. Considering hearses are a little spooky to begin with, we'd have to say that this abandoned 1947 Buick Roadmaster hearse is even spookier. It was found parked up in a field in Greece in 2014, seemingly forgotten about and totally alone. That makes it curious, because clearly at some point in the past, someone spent a lot of time and money renovating this car. It started off as a standard Buick Roadmaster 8, and based on its chassis number, was built in Flint, Michigan, USA. After getting to Greece, it underwent further coach building, and now has an engine from Mercedes-Benz, and taillights and bumpers from a 1956 Chevrolet. It also has 18 windows, including several in the roof, presumably so the person in the casket can enjoy a panoramic view while they're on their journey. After being found, the hearse was sold on eBay, and is now being restored by a specialist in Italy. At various points in the past 2 centuries, the engineers of several countries have experimented with the idea of making boats and ships out of different materials to the normal steel or wood. Almost unbelievably, one of the materials that has been experimented with is concrete, and the largest ever concrete ship was the Guichen, built by the Chinese during the 1970s. They successfully completed her maiden voyage in 1974, but barely moved at all after that, spending the next 4 decades marooned on a riverbank before she was finally demolished in early 2013. The colossal ship weighed an enormous 3,000 tons, but after so many years of abandonment, she'd become a hotspot for illegal activities and squatters, and so she had to be dismantled for health and safety reasons. The Guichen was built because the Chinese government was short of steel in the early 1970s, and it was hoped that she would become the first of a whole fleet of similar ships. But even though she sailed without issue, the fuel cost of powering such a massive ship through the water made the idea non-viable from a financial point of view. It appears that custom car enthusiasts really enjoy playing around with Buicks. We've already seen a heavily modified Buick hearse. Now here's a motorhome known as the Shamrock Away, built from the pieces of 4 different Buicks. The Shamrock Away was recently saved from a wrecking yard and isn't looking its best. But when it was built in 1962, it was the pride and joy of J. Dennis McGuire, a Buick lover from Alma, Michigan, USA. In very simple terms, the motorhome is made from one central Buick wagon, with another Buick split in half, with the form welded onto one end of the central Buick and the back on the other end. Some additional pieces were required to finish the car, and they also came from discarded Buicks. All told, the Shamrock Away is 6 feet tall and 28 feet long from bumper to bumper. It also contains 2 gas tanks, a bathroom area contained within a folding door, a double-core radiator, 2 air conditioners, and air shocks on the drive wheels. Its original owner passed away in 1990, which explains its abandonment, but we hope that someone takes it on as a restoration project. The most unusual landmark on Canada's Prince Edward Island is this seemingly abandoned U.S. Space Shuttle. Anyone who visits the island without knowing it's there always asks the same question. What is it doing in such an unusual location? Did it touch down here from space and get left behind after the pilot was evacuated? Actually, no, it didn't. This is one of only 6 full-sized U.S. Space Shuttle replicas ever built, and it was once part of the Great Island Science Adventure Park, an educational theme park that once existed on Prince Edward Island. The shuttle was one of the park's most popular exhibits, as it allowed the public to walk through and sit inside it, experiencing the same sights and sounds as an astronaut would. Sadly, the park went bankrupt in 2008 after 20 years in operation. and all of the other attractions were packed up and moved away. For some reason, nobody ever thought to come back for the fake Space Shuttle, and so it's still standing in this forgotten field, waiting for visitors to come and climb inside it again. Standing in the open air, in a field belonging to the V.V. Kubyshev Military Engineering Academy of Nikolo Irpino, Russia, you'll find the rusting hulk of a machine that was once thought to be the future of land-based combat. This rusty shell is all that remains of the MAZ-543 Redout, which was pitched to the military as a bunker on wheels. The potential of such a vehicle was obvious, and so it's no surprise that the USSR's army was keen to see it built after the idea was presented to them in 1957. The first attempt to turn the dream into reality was the ZIL-135L, but it was too costly and too slow. It wasn't until 1975 that the Minsk automobile plant finished its prototype of the MAZ-543. The Redout name comes from the French word rideau, which translates as dread. Unfortunately, it struggled on frozen ground and also marshland, which necessitated some adjustments before a second prototype was built in 1978. The second model was far more functional, but still too expensive to build for mass production to be considered a viable option. The idea was quietly dropped, and the prototype was abandoned to meet with this rusty fate. Back in the 1990s, a pair of hovercraft used to make regular runs between Chowpatty Beach and Juhu Beach in the Belapur area of India. The route is no longer open, and one of the 50 passenger vessels is permanently beached and exposed to the elements. Nobody can agree why the route failed, but Triton, the company that ran the route, blames the local government. When they launched for the first time in 1996, they claim that they were told that new jetties and access roads would be built along the route to allow them to pick up passengers. This didn't happen. And to make matters worse, fishermen deliberately attempted to disrupt the route by anchoring boats in the path of the hovercraft. Without the facilities that they were promised and facing opposition from the fishermen at every turn, the business shut down in April 1998, less than 2 years after it had opened. This hovercraft was built in 1992 and would still have been in good condition when it was abandoned. So why Triton never tried to sell it to recoup some of their costs remains a mystery. Building a fully functional ekranoplan, a plane that could take off and land on water as easily as it could on a runway, was a Cold War fascination for the Soviet Union for almost 30 years. They tested many prototype ekranoplans, one of the more successful of which was the Alexeyev A90 Orlyanok. Its name translates into English as eaglet. At its highest reaches, it was capable of an altitude of 10,000 feet, but it could also fly just a few feet above the surface of the sea, making use of the ground effect. 4 units of the plane were built starting in 1972, one of which never flew, the second of which was lost in an accident in 1992, and the remaining 2 were retired the following year in 1993. It's unclear why more units of the plane weren't ordered, as it appeared to be capable of every task that was expected of it. You can still see one of them today close to the Severnoye Park in Moscow's Tushino region, where it's been stationed as an exhibit. Sadly, visitors aren't permitted to open the doors and head inside the plane. Perhaps it's full of top-secret equipment. Or perhaps it's just badly decayed. Until 2008, the Morozovsky Quarry was one of the largest and busiest coal mines in Ukraine. The enormous site was populated by hundreds of human workers, but more notably by a fleet of gigantic walking excavator machines, shipping out hundreds of tons of coal every day. Now the mine is closed, and the quarry has fallen silent, leaving only the skeletons of the abandoned machines behind. It's no wonder that Ukrainians call this the Valley of the Dead Excavators. All of the machines are showing signs of rust, wear, and tear. That's to be expected. A few of the walkers are Soviet technology from the 1970s. Some of them are even older, German designs dating back to before the Second World War. This was one of the only sites in the country where brown coal was mined, and that uniqueness allowed it to thrive for decades. But by 2008, the mine's operators owed so much money that their electricity supply was cut off, condemning the site to abandonment and forcing the excavators, like the monstrous ERSHR 1600 machine with its digging capacity of 5,000 square feet of earth per hour, to be left behind. The name Hughes H4 Hercules might not mean too much to you, but perhaps you've heard of this one-of-a-kind plane through its nickname. It was known as the Spruce Goose. This wasn't so much a plane that could land on water as a boat that could fly. Unsurprisingly, it was a product of the eccentric mind of aviation pioneer Howard Hughes. Hughes hoped that this flying boat could be used as a transportation vessel during the Second World War, but he didn't get the prototype finished until 1947, by which time the war had ended. As the project now lacked a purpose, and therefore any prospect of being bought in bulk, the prototype made one single test flight to demonstrate its viability in November of 1947, and then never flew again. Despite being made almost entirely out of wood, the Spruce Goose has a wingspan of more than 320 feet. That gave it the largest wingspan of any plane that had ever taken to the air until the first flight of the scaled composites Stratolaunch in 2019. Even though it's getting a little old now, it's still in relatively good condition. You'll find it on display at Oregon's Evergreen Aviation and Space Museum in the United States of America. The story of the SS Aqua Rama starts in the Second World War, where she served as a troop ship for the U.S. Navy under the name SS Marine Star. She survived her combat service unscathed, and in 1952, she was renamed and adapted to become the largest ever passenger ship to sail on the Great Lakes. It was hugely popular as an attraction, but also hugely expensive to run. The Sand Products Company never found a way to make her profitable, and so in 1962, she was sold to a company in Michigan who wanted to use her to replace the Milwaukee Clipper. But the company couldn't come up with the $700,000 that would have been needed to dredge the harbor to accommodate the vessel. That meant she was effectively abandoned until 1987, when she was finally sold on to a new owner. This time, it was the North Shore Farming Company. They wanted to turn the ship into a floating casino, but never got the necessary licenses. Instead, it just sat in a dock in Buffalo, New York, until it was finally towed to Turkey to be scrapped in 2007. That marked the end of 42 years of floating listlessly. You would have thought that something as valuable and necessary as a mobile health unit would be well looked after, especially a mobile health unit that's still full of modern equipment worth millions of dollars. A facility like that should be out on the streets, providing essential care to people. But instead, here's one rusting on a side street in Parakanar, Pakistan. Inside the vehicle is an X-ray scanner and a collection of mobile laboratory facilities that could and should be providing medical assistance in difficult-to-reach areas. But even when these pictures were taken in 2015, it had been abandoned for at least 2 years. The German development bank KfW had donated the mobile health unit to the Directorate of Health in 2012, but local officials say that the donation was useless without a driver, technicians, or a fuel and maintenance budget. To put it another way, the local government expected the German bank to pay every cost that came with the van, and if they weren't willing to do so, then it would be left to rot, rather than the health authorities spending a single dollar on getting it up and running. It's a tragic waste, but at this point, it's probably too late to save it. You probably wouldn't want to step inside this Canadian houseboat. It looks beaten, warped, dirty, and broken. Perhaps you'll be more understanding of its circumstances when you hear its story, though. Impossibly, it washed up on a beach in Ireland in 2016 after traveling almost 2,000 miles across the sea. The fact that it's in one piece is miraculous. It's thought that the houseboat was built by Rick Small, an eco-adventurer from Canada's Thunder Bay. He signed the inside of the boat and pledged to donate the boat to the first person from the Newfoundland area to find it. Somehow, it ended up floating a long, long way away from Newfoundland, and eventually attracted the attention of the Ballyglass Coast Guard in Ireland's County Mayo. Despite having no captain and no propulsion, it had survived the transatlantic journey so well that several of Rick's personal possessions were still on board, including 2 of his kettles. Rick says he has no idea how it found its way out into the ocean, but he says that he's proud that it was built so well that it made it all the way overseas on its own. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, and you will be the first to know when a new video comes out. Thank you for watching, and see you soon.